Hey guys, welcome to the Weapon Refine analysis for December 2018. We got ourselves a lot of units this time that are showcased, so we're going to go through this extensively, look at their units, what I think about them, and how they fall into kind of like the meta of the game, and how you should properly utilize these new units and their weapons. I'm very happy with IS for the choices they made in the Weapon Refine, and I hope they continue to make these sort of things. Some people would maybe consider it pretty lazy, I guess, that maybe the white wings all have the same refine and it really only counts as one, but at least it didn't favor like one over the other. It's good. Like, I just like more older units getting their weapon refines, and there's definitely some winners in this and definitely some losers. So yeah, if you're on Twitch, you guys can feel free to say hello in the chat below. And of course, if you're on YouTube, feel free to say a comment to connect with the guys on Twitch. So we're going to go through the weapon refine effect, and then I'll show you a sample build. When I show you the sample builds, keep in mind they are budget oriented, unless I'm memeing. So you don't have to be, of course, paying big stuff, and they're not going to be merged up. And of course, there's some alternatives. So it's just a sample. Don't think it's like the best case scenario or anything. It's more to really show how you build these units in a budget way, and then you can really showcase the potential by investing in them more. Let's jump into it. Anyways, yeah, so first up we got Palla for the White Wings, the big sister. This is actually my favorite White Wing, personally. She, unfortunately, is the biggest loser, I'd say, of the batch, because if you don't already know, the White Wings just had their base weapons upgraded into weapon refines, and that's really all that came out of it. So the reason Palla is kind of the biggest loser here is because she's unlike Titania, for instance. Titania had a support weapon, which means that she could not really have to be a combat unit. She didn't have to. She had the choice. You could run triple tactics Titania, and that means you could, just dump her on a team, and she didn't really have to utilize her weapon in any way because it was already supporting. The problem with Palla is that everything about her weapon is combat oriented. You don't really have some way to support other units with her weapon, so it's not the greatest thing. It's definitely not the greatest weapon, especially for a lot of content. And her stat spread is so mixed bulk as it is anyways. It's just like all over the place in numbers, so she would have been better off with something that really took advantage of all those stats instead of creating such matchups that are so in her favor and not in her favor. Like, fighting against blues is a disaster, and then fighting greens is such overkill anyways. So it's kind of unfortunate that she ended up with a TA weapon. She didn't really need it, so whatever. Special refine though, this is the same among all the White Wings, and it's pretty much like a callback to the triangle attack that sisters in most Fire Emblem games tend to have, where as long as the Pegasus, the three sisters, are nearby each other, they get like a special attack. In this case, they get a bunch of stats as long as there's two flyers within range of her, within two spaces, and they get to hit a Brave Lance effect. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a really nice kind of weapon effect. It's probably one of the strongest you'll get, but the problem is she's running a ruby sword. So rip that, right? So the thing with that as well, the refine is a little bit limiting in how you're going to use it. It has to be used on a flyer team. Unfortunately, you can't really do a mixed team comp when you need 3 flyers to utilize a special refine. So if you're going to use her outside of a flyer team, you're going to have to choose a different weapon refine, speed, defense, res, whatever. Or honestly, just don't even use this weapon. You're probably just better off using like a Slaying Edge or a Wodao or Katamatsu for support. So that's kind of what I think about Palla. What her role really is though, and probably the best way to use the weapon, is as some sort of hard check in a lot of PvE content or Arena Assault. So the build I've showcased on the left, it would be like a Palla in Arena Assault, just giving her like Axe Breaker, attack 3, Glimmer, and using her special refine on a flyer team. You can pretty much like slaughter Asserter with this sort of build. And yeah, that's gonna do fine. And then when she's not really killing things, you just use her base gold flyers plus drive attack to try to support the other flyers. That's how I would recommend using Palla. You could also do this in other stuff too, plus gardens, grounds, maybe some Inferno maps, work fine just there. But as I said, as a combat unit, she's gonna totally dominate greens and get wrecked by blues, and that's not really what you want. Okay. Thematically, I guess, and some people have said this, is the reason she has the ruby sword in the first place is to protect her sisters. So both of them are blue, and that means their weakness is green. So she has that ruby sword to make sure she protects her sisters. So I guess that's the immersion behind it. I think that's pretty cool. So we got Catria on the far left. Due to her having a killer lance or a slaying lance when upgraded and being turned into the white wing lance, she's actually, in my opinion, probably the biggest winner of the batch of sisters. If you choose not to use the special refine on a flyer team, you pretty much could give her the speed refine and she gains like 3 speed, and you pretty much have like a really good slaying lance that way. And that's good. Like, just having a slaying lance is good because she has heavy blade, right? She can't use flashing blade, and you just need enough speed with enough attack, especially on like having attack tactic, speed tactic, hone flyers, just sort of those speed buffs, and you have a candidate for one of the best Gale Force users in the game. See, the thing with Gale Force users, and I've encountered this in Ether raids, I've encountered this in Grand Conquest and such, is sometimes it's not a good idea, or it's not good to have too much attack. You don't want too much attack. If you have too much attack, then you end up one-shotting units. And if you end up one-shotting units, you can't proc your Gale Force, which is the problem with some of the really high offensive units. For example, a plus attack Cordelia with like 38 attack might have too much attack and might kill the units, or with merges especially, that's the case. Whereas with Catria, you might not be reaching that sort of threshold of attack. Shanna also can kind of do this because she has a slaying weapon as well. So yeah, that's really what I like about that, just the consistency and being able to plop her onto any team to get that sort of thing. Also, if you do decide to use her on a flyer team, the fact that she gets so much stats and be able to quad would mean that you wouldn't even really need heavy blade. So if you really properly utilize the special refine, you could hit 4 times and you wouldn't even need heavy blade to get Gale Forces. But this is all a positional nightmare, and I don't know how consistent it would be, but it's something really cool and unique to her, just being able to use like attack defense 2 or just attack 3 or something and just going like that. But if you do end up killing in 2 hits, that's also something to consider, then heavy blade is fine in this heal. It's really probably where in Abyssal it shines the most, where you maybe wouldn't need heavy blade and just hit like 4 times and do something cool. Either way, I think Catria definitely became a lot better with this sort of refine. And finally, we have Est. So Est again, it came with a heavy spear, and now she upgrades to a white wing spear. Est is interesting. I think she's become a little bit of a meme, but honestly speaking, she's a really good unit because she has 35 attack, so she works really well with an effective weapon. She has a good attack stat, she has good res, so you honestly use defense ploy, and with her great attack stat, you're going to be one-shotting a lot of armors, including those that might be green. So you give her like a death blow, attack 3 seal, defense ploy, should hit a lot of things. If you're able to actually activate the special refine by having 2 flyers, she gets even more attack and even more like defensive stats, res, all this like crazy stat bloat. Brave Lance effect with an effective weapon makes her super unique as a unit. But again, positional requirements kind of make the whole special refine thing a little bit of a nightmare because you need 2 flyers around. But when I do set it up, she'll kill everything, including like green armors, because a double with an effective weapon is ridiculous, especially on a unit like her who has so much attack. Now, if you can't really use the positional requirements or you don't use her on a flyer team, then yeah, you just give her like the attack refine to scale even more off of the effective damage. Now, Glimmer is chosen because of things like scaling off of that effective damage, hidden run to make sure she's safe because otherwise her bulk isn't really the greatest. But yeah, S is cool, really good weapon after the weapon refine. All right, and now we got probably the biggest pog of the batch. So Ogma's special refine is interesting. It's probably a callback to the fact that he's like saved by Sheeta. So as long as he's within a flyer and I guess also infantry, he gets a bunch of attack and speed, which actually works really well with him because he has good attack and speed stat and even a really good defense stat, so his res is really the only thing lacking. You don't really need to go for like a minus HP Bane. You could probably go for minus res and use something like Panic Boy instead. Maybe if you did end up fighting maybe some green dragons or something, then making sure you use minus HP over minus res is kind of better in that scenario. But yeah, so much stats on him, so offensive, and he's like the third unit that can use Heavy Blade, I believe, in his weapon itself. So you got like Elwood, Braveroy, and now you have Ogma. So that makes him really unique. Unfortunately, they're all red swords, and that's kind of the thing that's annoying. And the fact that he's not cavalry is just makes him kind of less consistent than the other two horsies. So someone like Elwood and Braveroy are still going to be a little bit better for something like Ether Raids or even Arena Assault, where mobility is kind of king. But he can still do it, especially if you give him something like Smite. And what I've shown here is a sample build. If he takes enough damage after Fury, then you could escape root him out after Gale Force, which is kind of cool. Quick Impulse is used if you do attack into something like a range unit with Heavy Blade proccing. You pretty much just get your Gale Force off and try to run away, maybe a dance or something. That's pretty much how I would use Ogma as a sole unit on the player phase. You don't really want to use his special refine if he's a player phase unit, and that's what Heavy Blade kind of does. But that's why I have a secondary build for him that I want to show off. So if you want to use like a special refine, then the thing that's better here is to take something like Silas's Steady Stance, run Guard, run Attack Defense Bond, and he's got already a really good speed stat buffed up with Gladiator's Blade. Maybe you got some buffs around him, maybe like a Marth or Marth for Immersion. Any sort of hone speed and for defense makes him amazing. The Heavy Blade effect means that he's going to be consistently proccing off bonfires that scale really well with Attack Defense Bond and Steady Stance. If you had Steady Stance 4, for instance, you wouldn't even use Guard in the B slot. You could use something like Renewal instead. But yeah, Ogma's Refine definitely made him more flexible in whether you want to use him more offensively or defensively. And like I said, because he has a built-in Heavy Blade, he's got himself a really good flex in what you can do with him. Arena Assault, PvE content, even Ether Raids, he's going to do all that really well. And I'm going to be not surprised to see him used more often. Unfortunately, my thoughts on this is infantry units aren't really as good as flyers or cavalry, especially cavalry in something like Ether Raids. And flyers do have the mobility advantage for when there's a lot of rivers or lavas or that kind of stuff in maps. So that's what really holds him back. If you do use him though with maybe like a flyer on a mixed team comp, then he'll shine a lot better. Okay, and next up we got the Robins. I'm gonna really treat them the same in this sort of analysis and thoughts. Basically, they have tactic spectrum, and this is again a callback to the original Fire Emblems. I love that they do this thing. Honestly, like they make the refines fit the theme of the game. They don't really break patterns when they do these sort of things. Robin was known for having rally spectrum in his game, so it's cool that they kind of brought it back. It's also even better that what happened here with Robin is like it doesn't require him to actually rally or waste a turn. You just use it at the beginning of a turn. You just need a mixed team comp and they work really well, or he or she, doesn't matter. What's also really cool between the two Robins, and if I was to pick a favorite, I'd probably pick F Robin for two reasons. One, GHB units are bonus units. You can merge them through Grails consistently. And they can use G Dual Infantry, which is currently in the game, and the other dual skills. The other one, Blue Dual, is not available for M Robin. However, M Robin does have access to IVs, which means you can really mix around his stat spread a bit better. But the problem with that, of course, is M Robin has 4 Super Banes. So it really stinks because you end up really neutering one of his stats otherwise. The best way to use Robin is definitely just as a support. Like being able to buff every single stat on one unit is ridiculous. You can pretty much just stack drives and one unit does all the buffing. So on a mixed team comp, give your Robin double drives, have a couple other units with drives. Maybe Marth, for instance, is a really good candidate here on this team, or M. Corrin. You got your Robin then being the other buffer, and then you just have like a flyer or an armor unit or something, and you just you make this like really powerful unit. Chill attack would come off Garneth. And honestly, the best thing you could probably give on the A slot would be like Mirror Stance or a Bond skill, or even just Fury. Like it really doesn't matter what you use the A skill for. If anything, G Dual Infantry would do just fine. Glimmer is used there because of scaling of TA effects. So the fact that they have a refinable Raven Tome is also really unique to them. Hasn't been there before. It's also what makes like Palla and Titania different. It's that they have refinable TA weapons. But unfortunately, TA weapons being refined is like whatever. Like you're already winning your matchups anyways. But a refinable TA weapon like this doesn't give you a disadvantage. That's the difference. The only way to revert this sort of thing is if somebody uses Cancel Affinity and you use TA. a refinable Raven Tome is not as hampering of the negative effect of the gem weapons or the TA effect. So I like that because you can do more interesting things like this. So yeah, if you want to use Robin as a combat unit, you don't use the special refine, and you try to do something with Robin. The problem is they just don't have good BST. They don't have good stats. So what you're really ending up doing with combat-oriented Raven Tome is you give yourself like 3 res or 3 defense or 2 speed or 1 attack, and then you try to use the poor stat spread of the Robins. And with merges, this becomes a lot better. I gotta admit that merges do make the Robins a bit better because they do utilize all their stats well. But like 29 speed, 29 defense, and 29 res with mirror stats, it's just like we're in 2018, almost 2019. Like you can't really have those kind of stats anymore, and of course not even 50 attack, but with mirror stats 50 attack. The idea here is if the speed is low enough, and you could use something like minus speed, unlike male Robin for instance, you get doubled and then you bonfire back from good damage. And you could use even Iceberg or Glacies because the stat spread is the same. It's 29 res and 29 defense with something like mirror stance, of course. Bond skills also work, and if you don't want them to be beside friends, then solo skills are also a thing. But those are all higher investments. Either way, this is probably the best way you're going to be using Robin. If you have close counter, that's also an option. But again, not really the good stat spread for it. So as a combat unit, I don't really recommend using Robin that way. But as a support unit, they're really good, and people should really start using support units better and give them the respect they need. Support units is what makes like other units on your team become amazing. All right, and finally, probably the most unique weapon of the batch is Navarre's, and I'm kind of happy about this. I think we need more of this, especially on a GHP unit. So he's got himself like an Omega Quick Impulse. He has a slaying weapon, which again was upgraded from his previous one, Killing Edge. But you can do some really cool stuff with this. I am only going to showcase just a little bit of a taste of what it is, or probably the most consistent. I like to see consistent builds, so you always see that kind of stuff from me. So of course, what do you do with Special Acceleration on a melee unit? You give him Gale Force. So Scarlet Sword with Gale Force, and especially since an infantry can use Flashing Blade, means you can actually start with a 2-charge Gale Force. And with a 2-charge Gale Force, you just need to hit something once, and you get your Gale Force, which is really good because, again, sometimes you just do too much damage. Navarre doesn't exactly have the highest attack stat, so you probably won't run into that problem all the time, but you never know. Like attack speed link or something, or attack tactic and whatnot, like 56 attack into a green unit is still going to be doing almost 60 plus 66, 68 damage, and you're going to one-shot some greens, so it's sometimes useful for him to have that ready Gale Force right there. Also, of course, Fury Desperation for any follow-ups work really well with Flashing Blade. So yeah, consistency, Navarre does that really well, and his weapon really works well for it, especially in stuff like chain challenges, for instance, or Tempest Trials. Navarre could pretty much be doing this like every single map, something of this nature. Finally, if you decide to go all out, and probably one thing that I think is unique to Navarre is this sort of shenanigans. So Navarre can literally just start with a turn 1 Astra by himself, without anyone else supporting him. This would work better with like 1 infantry pulse, so you can give him an attack 3 seal. And yeah, you can pretty much just try to absolutely one-shot something with Astra. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the attack stat to make this work. So if you're going to do something of this meme nature, you better super buff him, merge him up, and hope for the best. But I think this is really cool, that you can do something crazy like this and do some crazy amount of damage. This is probably something that you might work in something like an Abyssal or a GHB without reinforcements, and you just one-shot some really annoying unit, something like a green or a red. And yeah, but again, it's a really high investment. I mean, you could use Death Blow 3, but Chill Defense off wall hard is already 20k feathers. But I just like the idea that you can do crazy things like this. So I'm definitely excited to see some creative ideas. Speaking of creative ideas, what is your favorite weapon refine of the batch? How do you intend to build and use these units? Let me know. Maybe give me some build ideas below. I'd love to read them. This is pretty much it for me for the weapon refine analysis December 2018. I'm very happy with the selection we got this time. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, thanks for watching. Peace.